Welcome to the In All Things podcast. I'm Sierra, and I'm glad that you're here for real, biblical, uplifting conversations on everything from God's grace and biblical covenants to hearing others' stories in their lives and faith. Let's imagine we're sitting down together for these conversations and walk together towards living out our theology in our everyday lives as we seek Christ in all things. Welcome back to In All Things. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I am going to introduce you to my friends Josh and Amanda, and they're going to share their story of meeting on a dating site, falling in love, and how God has worked through their first year and a half of marriage, and I'm really excited for you to hear it. I actually met Amanda through work, and it was definitely a God-orchestrated friendship that I'm really grateful for, and I've since gotten to know Josh as well, and they have become really great friends of mine. So I really am excited for you to hear their story and enjoy their conversation. Hi, Josh and Amanda.
Hey.
Hi.
Welcome to In All Things. I'm really excited that you're here today.
Thanks. We're excited to be here too.
Glad to be here.
Can you introduce yourself before we get started? Just kind of tell us a little bit about yourselves.
I'm Josh Wickstrom. I work with Thrivent as a financial advisor.
I'm Amanda Wickstrom, and I work at 3M as an industrial specialist. And we've been married 1.5 years.
Awesome. That's exciting.
Yes.
So I actually met Amanda through work. She is, I guess, our sales rep for 3M at my job. And that's how we met and became friends from there. And it's just been really fun to get to know you guys better and hang out and all that stuff. So,
And we both love Jesus.
And we both
That's
love
been so great.
Jesus. Yes. That's how we bonded. In a caribou coffee.
Yes.
Getting tape samples.
Yes.
So can you just share your love story with us? Like how you met, kind of the timeline of your dating and engagement and everything, and any fun stories that you have to share.
So Josh and I actually met on Hinge on a dating app. It was the start of COVID back in 2020. I was kind of like, well, what else am I doing? Might as well try online dating.
Join a dating app. Who did not do that?
Yeah. So, and Josh, actually, it was a total God thing. Unfortunately, broke his back and neck, and that caused him, like right before COVID started, and everything shut down right around that same time. So he decided to come back home and be with his family so they could take care of him a bit. And so he was back in Minnesota where his family is. And so he was living here, but technically his house was in Michigan. Mm-hmm. And so he was also on Hinge, I guess. And I sent the first message because I was very specific about who I sent messages to, because I wanted to be able to tell from their profile, besides it's just listing that they are a Christian, right, that they love Jesus. I wanted it to come and exude from their profile. And Josh's profile, he said that he wanted to be, or his dream job would be to be a worship leader, and he loved the Lord and was looking for someone else who loved the Lord. And it was very evident that he was living his life for Christ. So I sent him a message and we started talking, and we FaceTimed not long after, and he did share with me that he was living in Michigan, but staying right now in Minnesota. And kind of by a happy circumstance, his sister was a worship pastor at a church in my town. So he was down in the same town quite often. So we were able to date and see each other. And then he had the conversation that every girl, hopes that a guy has with her, the DTR conversation to find the relationship. And he actually asked me, I'd like to pursue you, but I do live in Michigan right now. How do you feel about long distance? And it had only been a few weeks, and I just thought I didn't want to lead this person on because I didn't know for sure, but I did care about him. And so I said, I know I am interested in you, but I don't know, and I'm okay with online dating, but I just don't know if I'm okay with us yet, officially, like being official.
Oh, sure.
And so we talked more that night, and then he said, hey, before he left, he said, do you want to walk me out? And I was like, oh no, he's going to try to kiss me. And I did not want to kiss, hold hands, anything like that, because I didn't want to lead him on if I didn't know how I felt about him. And so then I was like, oh, it's going to be awkward. I'm going to have to reject him. So I stepped out to talk to him, and he actually said, I'd like to pray for us. I'd like to pray over us, because we had been watching a movie with my roommates. That's why we stepped out. And So he did. He prayed over our relationship, and I was like in tears the whole time because it was just so beautiful. And in that moment, I was like, oh my gosh, like this is so different than anything before. Like even our first date was just so good. We ended up walking 8 miles on our first date, just talking. Wow. And talking about the Lord, talking about things that he had done in our life, just lots of similar things. And it was just very evident that there was so much different. And then when that happened, I was like, oh my gosh, this was one big thing. And so I walked back in and I said, my roommate, we need to pray right now. Like, we had this conversation. This is what I said, but now this is what I'm feeling. And I was like, God is doing something here. And her and I prayed. The next morning, I told my mom about it, and her and I prayed, told another friend about it, we prayed. And so then that next day, I just felt such an overwhelming peace that God was like, this is the right one. I want you to continue this. And I just felt such a peace about continuing getting to know Josh. And so that weekend, actually, it was Memorial weekend, and I was staying at a friend's cabin, and we ended the weekend early, and he said, well, would you want to come to my family's cabin and you can meet my parents? And I remember asking my friends, like, is this dumb because it's only been a few weeks? Like, what if he's an axe murderer? And I asked my mom that. My mom said, well, he won't be able to be an axe murderer in front of his parents, so nobody can lie. So I did end up going, and we became like officially boyfriend girlfriend that weekend. It was wonderful. Got to meet his parents and enjoy them. And again, we just, like most of COVID we just went on walks and talked because everything was closed. We couldn't go get dinner somewhere. We couldn't anything like that. So we just walked and talked. That was a lot of our dating relationship.
It's a good start, though. Those are good, solid dates.
Yeah.
Walking.
And then after a few months, he moved back to Michigan. We did long distance for about 5 months. And so we FaceTimed a lot and talked because that's what we could do. And actually, because it was COVID, this was, again, like just God taking care of us. Every few weeks, I was able to, since I was working from home, I would leave on a Wednesday night and I would drive to my parents' house in Chicago. And my parents were almost the exact halfway point.
Oh, okay.
So I would drive halfway home to my parents and I'd spend all of Thursday with them. I'd work and I'd spend then Thursday night with them, and I'd get some things ready, work a little bit Friday morning, line up calls, and then make calls and drive to Michigan. Okay. And then I'd stay with friends of his that weekend, and then also see him. And then I would just do the whole thing, driving back, like starting Monday and stuff, Go back to my parents and then back to Minnesota. So I would do that every few weeks, and we were just really fortunate because of COVID that timing worked out that way. Mm-hmm. And then eventually he did move to Minnesota, and that was wonderful. And we ended up dating for 8 months, and he proposed then at the start of that next year. And we were engaged for 8 months, and we got married.
Exciting.
And now we've been married a year and a half, so and it's been great.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Were you a financial advisor in Michigan too, or were you doing something else?
I was not. I was working for General Motors at the time as a mechanical engineer.
Oh, very cool.
Making cars go fast. That was my job.
That's awesome.
So it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. Mm-hmm. God was working in me at that time. I was kind of coaching some of my colleagues at the time on finances. And outside of that, I spent my time at church serving the youth group and leading worship. And I enjoyed both of those two things a little bit more than I enjoyed making cars go fast.
Okay.
So yeah, I thought I'd make the switch.
Yeah.
I had my own financial advisor at the time.
Okay.
And just really enjoyed the process, learned a lot, and started asking questions of what it might look like. And it turns out Amanda had a financial advisor at the same time.
Oh, okay.
Who was also a recruiter for Thrivent. So she mentioned to him that, hey, my boyfriend's thinking about
That's awesome.
this kind of a career.
Yeah.
Would you be willing to talk to him? And the rest, as they say, is history. So
I did not know that part, I don't think. That's so cool. That's really fun. You were not an axe murderer.
I was not an axe murderer. Yeah, that was not a thing. Never was, never will be.
Good. So before you two met, did you both have kind of like significant seasons of singleness, I guess, to describe that? Or had you been in relationships prior? Had you been actively dating for a long time?
Yeah, for me, I had dated somebody in high school, longer term. Dated one other gal when I was in college.
Okay.
And then both of us went separate ways after college and kind of learned we had different goals. And so from 2014 to 2020 then, I was single and enjoying it.
Yeah.
Lots of good things that we did between me and some of the guy friends I had over there.
Sure.
So I took advantage of that.
That's good that you enjoyed it. I mean, you can look back and say that was well spent. And
Absolutely.
yeah.
Well, you went on dates.
Yes, I did go on dates. I was, for the first couple of years while I was in Michigan, went on a few dates, tried online dating out there, a few different sites, eHarmony,
Sure.
Hinge, and went on some dates there. Was interested, but what I was finding was a lot of the ladies I was going out with, we'd go out once or twice, and then they'd say, I'm not moving more than like 5 to 10 miles away from home.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, well, I just moved 18 hours away from my family. So
Sure.
I at least wanted somebody who was willing to go wherever God had them
Right.
go,
Right.
and not be firm on that. So all of those dating relationships ended after 1 or 2 dates.
Sure. Hard in the moment, but God's protection in the long run.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually, there's kind of an interesting story around that point because there was a time, there was one evening that he had visited in Minnesota that weekend. And there was a night that I just felt a strong prompting from God that I had to tell him what had been on my heart and in my mind recently. And for some reason during my prayer time that morning, I had just thought about how I have always taken the mindset that I will never put limits on God. So I have moved from Chicago to Des Moines to Lincoln, back to Des Moines to Minnesota, wherever. And I've always just said, I'm not going to put limits on God and I'll go wherever. And so I've been reflecting on that. And I just felt a strong prompting that I needed to tell Josh that. And so there's one day that I actually turned to him and said, I just want you to know I'm willing to go wherever God takes me or takes us. And I just want you to be aware, like, even if that means me coming to Michigan, I'm in. And he looked at me and said, I was just about to ask you about that.
Oh, really?
So it's kind of a cool moment.
That is really cool.
And then he told me about the stories and just how he's just looking for someone, because he feels the same way, that it's like, wherever, we're not going to put limits on God, wherever that is. If he wants to take us to Minnesota or to Arizona next year, that we'll go. So
I love Arizona. I'll come visit you.
Perfect. There's nothing specific about Arizona.
Oh, okay. How about your answer for that question of the season of singleness, or were you actively dating a relationship, or?
Yeah, so I didn't date at all in high school much. And in college, I did have a serious relationship, and it was not a very healthy one. And I needed a lot of time to recover after that. And it actually was something that really turned me to the Lord, because it got to the point, because he was a little controlling, and there were a lot of friendships that I then lost because he was just adamant on time with him, and I wasn't spending as much time with the Lord, and God turned me back to him, and I really just had the Lord. And I remember I spent an entire summer just with God, and I don't regret that, just because it did so much for my relationship with the Lord. And so I did stay single for about 5 to 6 years after that. And I intentionally did not want to date. I said, I just want to focus on my relationship with God, my friendships, and just growing into the person God wants me to be. And then when COVID hit, my friend actually made my online dating profile for me and said, here you go. So I found a couple guys, you should talk to them. But my attitude was, it's COVID, what else am I doing? So then I did start online dating, and I did go on multiple online dates, and they all just didn't work out, weren't quite what I was looking for. But Josh obviously was.
Wonderful.
Yep. So my online dating experience was just interesting because it's a heavily secular world.
For sure.
And what I was looking for was someone who would love the Lord first and then love me. And that comes with, I had a few different deal breakers that were important to me that wasn't very common just in the secular world in general. And I would find out pretty quickly that a guy said he loved Jesus, believed in the Lord, but then when he would find out something like, I don't want to have sex before marriage, he would then say, I don't think I can do that, and would end it, which I was glad that he was being honest.
Yeah.
But there were times like that happened. So I got to the point where I had almost a bit of a formula where I would ask, the first question was, I would ask, what do you like to do on the weekend? And if they didn't say, I like to go to church on Sunday as part of their routine, because that's something that I love doing and look forward to. I have a huge community there. I would just know that I didn't want to be with them. And if they did talk about church, I would then ask which one, find out a little bit more about their church. And then I would communicate different deal breakers that I had. I would just say, I just want to make sure we're on the same page. I don't want to have sex before marriage. I'm not a drinker, partier. And I would also ask them, where does God stand in your priorities and your values, and why? And so that would prompt a lot of conversation, and it helped me into my experience of online dating, really quickly weed out who I wasn't looking to be with. And just being upfront about that, I found really helped, because there is definitely a bit of a hookup culture on online dating, and I didn't want any part of that. And I was intentionally looking for a spouse who would, like I said, truly love the Lord and then love me. So that was the way that I found the easiest way to kind of not waste as much time and not waste other people's time as well.
That's great. In my last episode, I gave my top 4 pieces of advice for online dating. One of them is to stand strong to your convictions and know what you believe, and don't think that you can go in there and change somebody. Sometimes there's some give and take with there, but not on those big items. And when you have a conviction,
totally, yeah,
stand strong,
100%. I think drugs was another one I said.
Oh, well,
no drugs.
It's a good deal breaker to have. So throughout your dating period together, were there any challenges that you two had to overcome that you have learned from?
Well, we obviously did date at a distance. We lived 12 hours apart from each other. And so that did come with certain challenges, but we don't really look at it as something that actually was a bad challenge, because it allowed us to get to know each other so much more, because all we could do was talk. That was just quality time, quality conversation. We could just FaceTime and talk. And so we were very intentional about that. It would be more difficult each time if we didn't know when we were either talking or seeing each other next. So we did learn to be intentional about that. And each visit that I had, we would plan when I would visit next, or when he would visit next. And then each time we talked about then when we would talk next. So it was way harder to say goodbye if we didn't have that set up.
Sure.
But that was something that we worked through and definitely learned.
Yeah.
The distance was the biggest challenge, I think.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it was a good opportunity to get to know each other, like she said, in a unique way. So it was a blessing at the end of the day.
Yeah. And you got to see each other.
Because of COVID, we actually got to see each other in person a lot more than if we would have without it. So
yeah, the first summer of us dating, we actually were at a family bonfire, and they had everybody go around and say what they were thankful for. And Josh said he was thankful for COVID.
Because of that?
Yeah, that's how we wouldn't have slowed down and taken the time and actually met each other.
So you moved home to Minnesota in November, you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So about 6 months after we started dating.
Okay.
Yeah. Between when we started dating and when I started my Thrivent job.
Okay.
It was 6 months.
Nice.
Yeah.
So even when you were dating, but probably more so when you were engaged, how were you guys intentional for preparing for marriage?
There were a few things that we did. Even before we were dating, I like to say you should be the person that you want to marry.
That's good.
And so even before we met each other, like I was working on myself, trying to stay in shape, doing the things that I love to do, and making time for people and serving as much as I could, because that was a big value in my life. And, you know, making sure I was digging into the Word like I should. That was an example that my dad gave to me. I would wake up every morning and he'd be sitting in his chair reading the Word, and I always wanted to be that. So, I was working on myself a lot more when I was single. As far as when we were dating, we started to do some devotionals together, and even into engagement. We did 2 separate different devotionals.
Yeah, we did a dating devotional that had different questions, and we also did do an engagement devotional. So there are different questions that it would go through and have us start talking about just having the right conversations. We also prayed together every night, and we still do that to this day. And then we did do premarital counseling. We both each had separate mentors that we met with and talked through, and now we as a couple have couple mentors that we meet with as well.
I think the communication, or just us having to talk more and touch less, if that makes sense. Yeah. It was more of a, I don't know, it was a different kind of relationship. So we really had to learn how to communicate and be intentional about it. And I think that strengthened us for the start of marriage too.
Yeah, and prayer was a big part of preparing for marriage. I prayed so heavily for Josh that I actually, each day of our engagement, I wrote down a prayer for him every day.
Wow.
And I prayed over just who he was going to be as a father. I prayed over who he was going to be at work, and just that everything that he would do would just point to the Lord. Like, I prayed over every aspect that I could think of him every day, and I wrote it all down. And I then the night before our wedding, I gave him that journal.
That's really cool.
It was really cool.
I was just thinking, if there's anybody listening who is dating or is engaged and they want to do a devotional, it'd be great to have a recommendation.
Yeah, the dating devotional was Devotions for Dating Couples by Ben Young and Dr. Samuel Adams.
I'll just add that I think that it's extremely important. Our pastor gave us this advice, because we did meet with our pastor as well multiple times, but he gave us the advice to meet with a premarital counselor that you have to pay for, and that'll be the best investment in your marriage. So we not only met with him and did premarital counseling with our pastor, but also then with a premarital counselor that we financially paid for, which then did knock off a hefty portion off of our marriage license for doing premarital counseling. So
Oh, really?
Yeah, it did.
That's awesome. I've never heard of that. I've only ever heard of like pastors, like the person who is going to marry you.
Yeah, we went to Counseling Care. That's here in the Twin Cities. It's actually, they talk about it on KTIS.
Sure.
Counseling Care. It's a Christian counselor.
Okay.
They're great.
Awesome. A little plug for them.
We're also sponsored by Hinge.
Oh. So obviously getting married was a deep desire for both of you. What has been one of your favorite parts of marriage?
I would just say the opportunity to come home to someone each night and do life together. That's the biggest blessing and, biggest blessing that I can think of. Just to be able to do life with someone.
Yeah, God handed me this blessing of a teammate, and that's the most beautiful thing I think of marriage, is you have this teammate. I mean, even when any sort of sticky situation happens, I have someone that I can come and talk to. That's my person. That's there for me. I think as women, we a lot of times confide in our moms, and we have strong relationships with our moms. But at the end of the day, our dads are our mom's person. And so then when we get married, we have our person finally.
Yeah.
And it's this person that God orchestrated for your life, and it's your teammate. So when something scary like work is demanding, you must get a vaccine or something like that. That gets a little scary. And what are you going to do?
Yeah.
And you don't know what's right and what's wrong. You have your teammate. I remember thinking, thank goodness I
Yeah.
have Josh to talk to about this. And especially like even during the night, you wake up from a nightmare and I turn over and he's there. And it's so nice just having someone to do life with. Another thing I would say is just a wonderful part of marriage is just being able to serve together. That's one of my favorite things to watch Josh do, is serve others and serve at church, serve at motocross camp, whatever we're doing. And it is just so beautiful to see his heart pour out in those ways. But it's just really cool to do those sorts of things together as a couple.
Have there been any aspects of marriage that have been harder than you expected?
No, we're perfect.
Yeah.
I mean,
So many things.
So many.
Just what do I say first? I would say for me, I realized how much of a selfish person I am after I got married. I had lived 10 years by myself or with other friends, and just was able to do whatever I wanted when I wanted. And so when I got married, getting to communicate with my wife, and asking if it was okay or if it was a good day to go do something fun.
Right.
That was a hard thing for me to learn.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, it's tough because what the world shows marriage is not what marriage is. What movies show you of what things look like. And it's just so unhealthy at times, especially social media really pushes happy wife, happy life. And Josh and I do not support that. We say happy spouse, happy house. Mm-hmm. And there's just so many different things that are just portrayed so poorly about marriage, or making men look dumb or insufficient, and the wife's always overworked or whatever it might be. Yeah. And it's a partnership. It's a true partnership. So it's just been hard getting over what the world kind of makes you think that marriage is gonna look like. A lot of movies make it seem all about the physical, and it's not. Yeah. This is your person that you are to love and support in the hard days and the stressful days, no matter what they're going through. Celebrate within the happy days. And you join their family. You join so many aspects of your lives together. And also just expectations are another hard thing. There's so many expectations that you don't even realize that you have. You just assume because you see in movies that he will always bring me roses on Valentine's Day. Sure. That's an expectation. Yeah. But maybe his parents didn't do that. Maybe they celebrated a different way and they did their own thing that your husband never saw, and he doesn't know, first of all, that that's something you want. I think actually for the first year of our marriage, Josh thought I was allergic to flowers because I told him I was allergic to everything but rocks and water, which is kind of true, but I'm not allergic to flowers. So he thought that and never brought me flowers. And I remember telling him at one point, I think our second Valentine's, I was sad that he didn't give me flowers. Oh. And he had no idea that I had that expectation. And I simply said that. And then the next year there were flowers. Or that night we went and picked out flowers. And the next year there was flowers. And I just think that there's so many different expectations in our head that we don't even realize are there. And then they come out in marriage. And then when you take a step back, then you think and go, I didn't communicate that. How is he supposed to know? So I can't hold him accountable for that because I didn't communicate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
It's also, I lived with girls for many, many years through college, and then had a female roommate before Josh moved in. Living with a boy is very different.
I have
beard trimmings.
Everywhere.
Beard trimmings everywhere.
I actually just pulled out a piece of hair from my shirt that I'm wearing right now. That is not mine. Okay. Because I have no hair. So.
Do you guys have different not levels, but ways of cleaning or levels of cleanliness? That sounds but your room is.
Oh yeah.
That's a good point.
Josh told me he was clean. He thought he was clean.
Oh, okay. It's like, was it true?
And then he saw how I clean, and then he realized he was not clean. Remember the first time we sat down to talk about chores and dividing that up, what it would look like? And we just said, okay, what are realistic expectations for how often we should clean the bathroom? And we both wrote them down and then I said, I was thinking every week. And Josh goes, oh, I thought once a month. Yeah. That was quite the exercise we went through. That was in our newlyweds devotional.
There you go. It's probably a good exercise to go through.
Yeah, that was a hard thing for us to learn, though. Like the different, it's kind of a buzzword today, but roles that the husband and the wife have in the home. It can have a very negative connotation. But both of us grew up playing sports, and we're a big part of teams, and we both understood that there are different roles. She played a goalie on college teams, and I played basketball. I was a shorter guy, so I was not the one down at the post. And,
sure.
And so, like, we both understood that at a sports level.
Yeah.
But it is totally different when you're in the house, and we are part of a team, and we both need to pick up the slack when the other person is busy and stressed out. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, we had a lot of discussions and still have discussions on cleaning and different roles in the house at different times, because there are times when she's busier than I am, and so I need to step up.
Yeah. And you guys did talk a little bit about singleness, but do you have any like practical advice for people who are single?
My biggest piece of advice is be the person you want to marry. Take the time to work on yourself. Mm-hmm. It's a gift to be single. Paul even says that. I'm not exactly sure where, but singleness is a blessing. Use it. Serve. Because you're going to serve as a single person more, at least other people, more while you're single. You'll have the extra time, so use it. Dig into the Word, study it. Yeah. You have more time when you're single than you do married.
Yeah, I would say truly not to take for granted that time that you are single, like Josh was saying, just because you do have so much more time. You're able to spend so much time with the Lord. But I look back on that time of singleness, and my relationship grew so much with the Lord. Mm-hmm. It leaps and bounds. And I'm still growing. There's many things that I'm still learning, but I'm learning God, and I'm learning this person now too. And my focus is on the Lord, of course, but it just does look very different than when I was single, and I would not take for granted any of that time looking back now, because wow, did my relationship just, what should I say? I'm trying to think of the right word to use. Like wow, did my relationship explode with God in the best way. Yeah. And the friendships that I made, the communities that I established, just the people that are going to be in my life for life. And then we're so excited to then do it with me as they watched me get married and just continue on. They're going to be people who our families will get together and things like that. So I'd say too, with singleness, not to, people say don't settle, just trust God with the process, because He is going to orchestrate the most beautiful picture for your life. And just don't settle and think, oh, I guess my standards are too high. Just pray about it and give it to God, and let Him lead it and guide it. And it's going to be so much better than anything you could have done.
And at the same time, give people a chance. I think a lot of people today have this hallmark person in mind when they're dating, and it's a movie. It's not real life. Give someone a chance. I always say everyone's worth getting to know. God made them. They're special. Right. And people look different, and their hearts look different once you really get to know them. So Amanda would say, I opened up a lot more after date number, 3, 4. I'm more of a closed book than most. So I can get funny at times, and you get to know someone at different hours of the night, and it shows different parts of them that you may or may not like, but give them a chance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I had a friend tell me one time that if someone loves Jesus, they're worth at least one date. So don't just go based on looks. Don't go based on what you picture and think that they should be or look like, or who you had in mind for your husband or wife. If they love Jesus, they're worth at least one date.
That's good advice. So what are some things that the Lord has taught you throughout the past 3 years, from going, like, kind of from the end of your singleness to now being married a year and a half?
The biggest thing for me is just to trust God. My plans were play college basketball, get my dream job at Polaris, get married by 24, 25, start a family before 30, and none of those things came true. And I couldn't have written this story any better myself. So just trusting that he's got it in control and his timing is perfect is the biggest thing for me.
Yeah, God is so faithful. And that's something too that has really stuck out for me is God's faithfulness. He's just shown me that all through our relationship, and all through my dating, all through our engagement, all through even just into our marriage. And there's a song called Faithful Now by Vertical Worship, and it says, you make mountains move, you make giants fall, you break prison walls. Like, it talks about so many things that happen in the Old Testament. And a lot of times people go, the Old Testament, and kind of roll their eyes and think it's boring. But when I love it. When I look at the Old Testament, I look at it as if you were dating or married to somebody, and you go home, meet their family, and you see picture albums of what they would look like before you met them and when they were little, and just who they were before you knew them. And I feel like that's what the Old Testament is for us, for God. And it's who God is before we knew him. And I just see his faithfulness plastered all over the Old Testament. He just over and over and over again was so faithful. And in that song, it talks about he was faithful then, so he will be faithful now. And every time I look at Josh, I just think the Lord is faithful. Every time I look at his face, I just am so grateful for the Lord's faithfulness, because it was painted all over our relationship. And like Josh said, I could not have planned it better. And that's just something the Lord has continued to show, that he has been faithful. He will continue to be faithful, and he will always be faithful. And that's been something that's really cool. Another thing that God has taught us is that marriage really is something you do. It's not something you receive. And a lot of people go into it thinking, I'll get married, and then I'll have this person who's going to make dinner for me. I'll have this person who's going to do this. And they think about the things that they will receive from it. But it's something that you get up and choose to do every day. And if you focus on loving and serving that person, how much better can it look? And that's just something that has really stuck out for both Josh and I, that we've learned that it's just all about what we do and do for each other. And we try to outserve the other person.
I just wish I didn't have to break my neck to meet you. That's all.
Well, thank you so much, Josh and Amanda, for coming on. I loved hearing your story, and I even learned some new things. That's exciting. But just to hear how God has worked in your relationship over the past 3 years, it's crazy.
Yeah, it was good to be here.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having us. We love you, friend.
Thanks for joining in on today's conversation. I pray that you feel encouraged and uplifted in your walk with the Lord, and I hope to see you again. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at In All Things Pod, or visit my website, inallthingspodcast.com, for more content. If you enjoyed the episode, I would love it if you invited your friends into our conversations. Please share with your friends and leave a review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite listening platform. This helps get the word out about In All Things so that it's easily accessible to more people. See you next time.